Is veganism harming us? And have Adventists wrongly magnified a plant-based diet as a salvational issue historically and culturally? I would ask, how about balancing our hormones holistically and gently and letting nature take her time rather than forcing our bodies into an unnatural metabolic state that is always otherwise classified as a disease when it's not intentionally induced through dieting? Salvation is restoration. Salvation is about restoration to God's original ideal, and that ideal is a holistic way of living and being. I'm taking to the microphone today because recently some formerly plant-based Adventist professionals have come out with warnings against the potential dangers of a vegan diet and instead are promoting the use of animal products and meat. They've also raised some interesting claims regarding the counsels of Ellen White and her own practices. So what's true, what's less true, and what are my thoughts about this in light of the times we're living in, both agriculturally and prophetically? Well, I resonate with a lot of the issues that are being presented. Extremism is a very dangerous and prevalent reality, as well as a spirit of self-righteousness and legalistic adherence to a certain set of practices among Adventists. I can't agree more strongly about considering context and applying a discriminating eye to both our religious councils and to scholarly resources that sometimes put forward conclusions that are based on poorly designed research. As the scripture says, we should test everything and hold on to only what is good. I'm going to go through 7 points in response to some common issues that are being raised, and number 7 might surprise you. First, let's talk about the science. Nutrient-depleted produce, B12 deficiency, chemical contamination, a high-fat animal diet as a remedy, and protein. Claim number 1. Soil depletion has led to about a 50% decrease in the nutritional content of produce. One issue that individuals are bringing up is that depleted soils have led to a precipitous drop in the nutritional content of our produce, and because of this, they say that plant-based diets can no longer sufficiently meet our nutritional needs as they once could. Soil depletion is actually something that I have done work addressing in my own content, both on my garden channel and on my food channel, and it's an issue that I wholeheartedly promote awareness around. Let me submit to you a perspective that goes to the root and suggests that our focus in view of this issue should be reforming our agricultural practices, promoting regenerative agriculture, and learning how to grow our own super nutritious food, as we were also counseled to do by God. We should also learn to utilize the produce that's available in the most nutrient-dense preparations as possible. Did you know that research shows virgin soils are not depleted the way that industry-farmed soils are? So not only can you often find more nutritious produce that is locally grown, but you can also transform your own patio or backyard and grow your own produce that is nutrient-packed and delicious. You can learn to feed your own soil. We also need to talk about the fact that soil, like our own body, is capable of healing. I watched my dad transform any soil from sand to clay in just one growing season using bionomic, biointensive gardening methods. We need to raise our influence and our awareness toward regenerative agriculture. The condition of our soils is not just affecting produce either. Research shows that the health of the animals that are fed off of these depleted soils has also tremendously decreased. Without any judgment toward other people's personal choices, I have found a very effective method to address this issue that does not resort to the regular use of animal products. Claim number 2, a vegan diet contributes to deficiencies. A healthy diet is individual and is anything that keeps you from showing deficiency. You can absolutely be a vegan or a vegetarian and be unhealthy. And it's not that there's a one-size-fits-all in every particular. Obviously, there are certain foods that are going to work for some and not going to work for others. There are allergies, intolerances, and sensitivities, but there is an original overall design that is applicable to all humankind. I'm always troubled by the claim that we can't get everything we need from a plant-based diet. Here's why. Did God put everything we needed in the original diet or not? Like, did he miss something? A better question is, where did the animal get its B12? Where did the animal get its iron, or whatever the nutrient might be? The animal either produced theirs or got it from grass. So if a nutrient is an issue for us, the question should be, why aren't we obtaining, retaining, or metabolizing ours from plants as well? Did you know that B12 is synthesized by bacteria in our gastrointestinal tract? It's the only vitamin that's synthesized exclusively by bacteria, and it is present in our small intestine. Interestingly, it's found in higher concentrations in fecal samples from South Indians. Is someone looking into that? And guess where B12 is absorbed? In the ileum, which is the distal portion of our small bowel. So it's being synthesized by bacteria in our gut, and it's absorbed in the lower portion of our gut. So why do we need to eat it? Do you know what the best animal sources of B12 are? The meat and milk of herbivorous ruminant animals that eat plants. Interestingly, the concentration of B12 is actually lower in omnivorous animals. Ruminant animals acquire B12 through a symbiotic relationship with bacteria in their stomachs. And while people stress that plants do not contain considerable amounts of B12, researchers at MIT, led by Professor of Biology Graham Walker, have been for years studying microbes in the soil that produce B12. These soil microbes live in symbiotic relationships with the roots of plants, and they are a total enigma to researchers because they don't require B12 for survival, and the plants that they have relationships with don't require it either. Professor Walker points out that it takes more than 30 genes to synthesize B12. That's a lot to carry around if you don't even need it. Why is it there? I am going to radically suggest that it's there for us, for animals. Ruminant animals are accumulating B12 and B12 synthesizing bacteria from the roots of the plants they eat. It's recognized scientifically that plants and mushrooms do carry a small percentage of B12 due to bacteria in the soil and on their aerial surfaces. But the experts tell us that it is not a sufficient amount to provide for our biological needs. This leaves us with the questions of where does the bacteria that synthesize B12 come from in our gut? What is happening to the B12 that they're synthesizing? And or what's happening to the bacteria themselves that are supposed to be synthesizing the B12 in us? Did you know that leaky gut contributes to B12 deficiency? And that an imbalance in our gut microbiome can cause the bacteria that synthesize B12 to be lost. When the gut is overrun by hostile or competitive bacteria, we don't have much of a chance to synthesize our own B12. And incidentally, antibiotics are one of the major contributors to the development of leaky gut. So we should be limiting the use of antibiotics as much as possible, which you can't do if you're eating a lot of meat because the animals themselves are being pumped full of antibiotics, which we are then getting secondhand. At the same time, these Adventist dietitians are arguing that Ellen White only spoke against meat in the context of diseased animals before the invention of antibiotics. Are we going to rely on the use of antibiotics to make meat consumption safer when these antibiotics are slaughtering our gut bacteria and contributing to vitamin deficiencies themselves? Maybe we shouldn't have to depend on dietary sources of B12 from other herbivorous animals, and if we are, maybe it's a sign that something is already wrong in our gut. By the way, B12 deficiency is not just an issue in vegans. There are studies that have shown it to be more prevalent, particularly in Western countries. But there are also studies, such as one from the Middle East, that showed barely a difference between 40 and 50% respectively between vegans and omnivores. And a study in New Zealand actually found that B12 concentrations were higher in their vegans than in those who consumed animal products. We don't hear about these studies, but this all suggests that there's something else going on here that we're not talking about. So I'm talking about it. We need to get to the root of things and heal the root. Heal the gut, heal and balance the gut microbiome. Our gut health is at the center of immune health, mental health, and just so many things. You may think that you've gotten to the root by identifying a deficiency, but getting to the root is actually figuring out why this deficiency is actually there to begin with. Otherwise, maybe we're just putting band-aids over symptoms and literally pouring resources into a basket with holes, content that our lab values are staying barely within a normal range where we're not experiencing symptoms anymore, but we haven't healed the root. And by the way, B12 is highly available from algae, like in the sheets that we wrap our sushi in, and also from nutritional yeast. So there are other options when it comes to B12. Claim number 3. Plant foods are contaminated with pesticides and are therefore less safe than animal products. Did you know that animals store resources in their tissues, but they also store toxins in those tissues as well? We're familiar with this as it relates to bioaccumulation and biomagnification of mercury in fish, but it actually applies to all toxins in all animals. Biomagnification means that the concentration of toxins is higher in successively higher levels of animals on the food chain. We think of fat cells as energy storage containers, but chemicals and toxins are actually attracted to fat cells as well. Fat cells have a large cavity where chemicals and toxins collect and are harbored. Just one example. Studies on chronic low-dose exposure to organochlorine pesticides, abbreviated OCPs, show that the consumption of OCP-contaminated foods is a major external source of toxicity. We're being told right now that our produce is less safe due to chemical contamination from pesticides. But even though OCPs were introduced as agricultural pesticides, the primary food groups contaminated with OCPs today are actually animal products: meat, fish, eggs, and milk. This is due to their biomagnification in the food chain. In other words, we are actually at higher risk from consuming the animal that ate the pesticide-contaminated plant than we are from eating the plant itself. Secondly, OCP-contaminated fat tissue in the human body serves as an internal source of toxicity. What I mean by this: when an OCP chemical enters into the body, it is stored in fat tissue. Therefore, even when there's no longer any external source of toxicity, the OCP chemicals that are already stored in fat tissue are released on a continuous basis whenever fat mobilization takes place, meaning those toxins are released whenever you burn fat, like in your amazing fat-burning keto diet. Blood serum concentrations of OCPs were recently linked to cognitive impairment and dementia in general populations. For example, the risk of future dementia or cognitive impairment in elderly people was 3 times higher in individuals that had high levels of OCPs in their blood. And this result was after extensive covariate adjustment, meaning they rigorously adjusted for all possible variables. I can publish links to these studies. I'm basically just quoting studies. So, we're depending on the bioaccumulation of nutrients in meat, but we're also getting the bioaccumulation of toxins. What we really need is holistic healing that gets to the root. We're being told that it is not about exclusion at this point in history, and that excluding animal products is an exclusion of critical nutrients at a time of depletion. But with the utmost respect, I don't see the exclusion of animal products as an exclusion of nutrients. Based on science, I see it as an exclusion of toxins and dead waste material in favor of inclusion of more nutrient density closer to the solar energy source, preferably and ideally with enzymes and electricity intact. So no, it's not about exclusion, it's about inclusion, much, much more inclusion of the healing, truly nutritious herbs of the field that God gave to us in Genesis. Claim number 4, a high-fat animal product diet is a safe and effective strategy for weight management and a remedy for disease. I really need to talk about the example that's out here of a keto diet melting off stubborn 3-month postpartum pounds. Okay, without condemnation and in the utmost gentleness, I would ask, how about balancing our hormones holistically and gently and letting nature take her time rather than forcing our bodies into an unnatural metabolic state that is always otherwise classified as a disease when it's not intentionally induced through dieting? Did you know that our bodies were designed to burn carbohydrates as a main fuel source? Our central nervous system cannot use fat as an energy source, only glucose. Ketosis is a chemical imbalance that is your body's response to carbohydrate starvation when it is being forced to find an alternative fuel source. It does this through the overproduction of acetyl coenzyme A, which then leads to the production of ketone bodies, which are highly volatile and toxic compounds. There's a reason why ketogenesis is accompanied by symptoms such as headache, and you're advised not to try this diet outside of the supervision of a dietitian. These are not random or benign or healing crisis symptoms. Acetone, which is one of the primary ketones that are produced on a ketogenic diet, is highly inflammatory and neurotoxic. So the body is working hard to eliminate it through the respiratory system, giving you that classic fruity breath smell that accompanies ketosis. In the past, I was intensely interested in the success of a ketogenic diet for treating epilepsy in children. However, studies have come out reevaluating the safety of a ketogenic diet and revealing that ketone bodies can cause protein modifications that are implicated in vascular damage. They can induce glucose intolerance and cause neurodegeneration. Increases in TNF-alpha, which is a risk factor for vascular inflammation, as well as irreversible protein oxidation, are dependent on the degree of ketosis. Even mild hyperketonemia is linked to cardiovascular disease. Other complications associated with a ketogenic diet, as studied in epileptic children, include selenium deficiency, which contributes to myocardial dysfunction, as well as QT prolongation, which is showed on electrocardiography. These are significant enough to have caused sudden death, directly caused sudden death in some of the children who, under medical supervision, were on a ketogenic diet for epilepsy. So, evidence-based practice says that beyond just supervision by a dietitian, people who are on a ketogenic diet should be monitored for QT prolongation. They should have echocardiography as well as selenium levels both before and during the ketogenic diet. Are these risks justifiable if your child has intractable seizures? I'm not going to be the one to say no. That is something to be carefully considered prior to informed consent. But as a simple strategy for weight loss or weight management, personally, as an evidence-based medical professional, I could not in good conscience recommend this. Going back to the postpartum weight issue, those extra fat stores are there for a reason. They're there to support your body through the process of lactation when you're making that 50% saturated fat beverage for your baby over the course of ideally a year at least, minimally. The natural rebalancing postpartum can take 6 months to a year and is a very individual process that varies from person to person. There's absolutely nothing wrong with you if a mere 3 months postpartum you're not back to your pre-pregnancy weight. I just have to say that. We need to look at the body holistically, not just through narrow symptom-focused lenses. You may find a strategy to address weight or brain fog or some symptom like that, but we have to think about, why is this strategy working? What are the possible side effects and adverse repercussions? And are we being kind to the rest of our body in the process? Having a high protein and fat-full breakfast can be very important for blood sugar balance, for mental health and mood stability, and you can achieve that with healthy plant-based fats like avocados and nuts and using legumes. I just recently released my healing story of eliminating brain fog, chronic fatigue, neutropenia, and autoimmune dysfunction, and I'm one of many, particularly outside of Adventism, who are finding solutions by coming closer to the Genesis ideal, the original diet, instead of further from it. Claim number 5. Animal protein is more bioavailable than plant protein. The claim that animal protein is superior to plant protein is inaccurate. What you need is simply a full spectrum of amino acids, which is what all of your proteins, no matter the source, are broken down to in your body. You can more than adequately provide for this if you know which plant foods to combine and how to prepare them in the most maximally digestible form. Enzymes are a huge part of that. Vitamin C and B vitamins are a huge part of that as they assist in protein metabolism. Many of these are thermolabile vitamins, meaning that excessive heat destroys them. So if you're eating plant-based, but you're eating a ton of overcooked food, then that could create an issue for you in the bioavailability of your proteins. Enzymes are also destroyed by excessive heat. Animal protein is labeled more bioavailable because it is a complete protein that is rapidly broken down. But quinoa, edamame, buckwheat, chia seeds, hemp seeds, even just the simple combination of whole grain rice with beans, all provide complete protein sources. Additionally, sprouting releases enzymes that increase the bioavailability of protein as well as other nutrients. These nuances have not been controlled for in the studies that give you your 80% versus 90% bioavailability of plant protein versus animal protein. And plant-based bodybuilders do not have to rely on protein powders in order to bulk up. Examples: Hollywood stunt actor Eli Martyr builds muscle on a fully raw, fruitarian diet. Fitness coach and nutritionist Remsa Noor builds tons of muscle mass on a healthy, high, raw, vegan diet. These are just 2 examples. Utilizing seeds, nuts, and sprouted, protein-rich plant material is entirely sufficient. Now, I also believe there are times for utilizing supplementary nutrition. There are many things, such as goat milk and egg yolks, that can be used intelligently in a medicinal manner. But is promoting long-term, regular use of animal foods in line with God's instructions? Claim number 6. Mrs. White ate meat for most of her life and never prescribed a specific diet for physical or spiritual health. Let's talk about the counsels and the Adventist health message. Individuals I've been hearing claim that Mrs. White ate meat for most of her life and continued to use animal products in her home, that she wrote advocating no specific diet, and that her statements regarding the dangers of meat are contextual to her time, namely, in the context of diseased animals and before the invention of antibiotics and proper refrigeration. So again, with zero condemnation toward anyone else's personal choices, I have to point out that while Mrs. White absolutely was not vegan, she did maintain a meat-free table in her home and a meat-free diet for a little over 50 years after receiving her visions on health reform between 1863 and 1915. Isolated claims to the contrary have been rebutted by those who knew her well. If you don't believe in the divine inspiration of Ellen White, no one needs to pressure you to follow her counsels as coming from the Holy Spirit. Let every person be fully persuaded in their own mind. But we should be fair and true to the historical facts. She wrote, "I have thought for many years that I was dependent upon a meat diet for strength. It has been very difficult for me to go from one meal to another without suffering from faintness at the stomach and dizziness of the head. Eating meat removed for the time these faint feelings. I therefore decided that meat was indispensable in my case. But since the Lord presented before me in June 1863 the subject of meat eating in relation to health, I have left the use of meat. We use fruits and vegetables liberally. My brain has been constantly taxed and I have had but little exercise, yet my health has never been better than for the past 6 months. My former faint and dizzy feelings have left me. We have no meat upon our table. We use no lard, but in its place, milk, cream, and some butter. I have not changed my course a particle since I adopted the health reform. I have not taken one step back since the light from heaven upon this subject first shone upon my pathway. When making these changes in my diet, I refuse to yield to taste and let that govern me. Shall that stand in the way of my securing greater strength that I may therewith glorify my Lord? Shall that stand in my way for a moment? Never. I was a great meat eater," she says, "but when faint, I placed my arms across my stomach and said, I will not taste a morsel. I will eat simple food or I will not eat at all." Testimonies from the Church, Volume 2, 371, and Counsels on Diet, 482 and 483. I will highlight that a healthy diet is more than just what subjectively makes you feel good temporarily. God knows what's happening inside your mind, in your body, and your spirit over time. He knows how He made this organism, what He created it to run on, and how it will burn most clean. A quotation that's being emphasized heavily by these formerly plant-based Adventists is one that says that there is no specific diet marked out. Dear loves, this statement must be read through to its completion in order to not give a false impression. It says, "We do not mark out any precise line to be followed in diet, but we do say that in countries where there are fruits, grains, and nuts in abundance, flesh food is not the right food for God's people. I have been instructed that flesh food has a tendency to animalize the nature, to rob men and women of that love and sympathy which they should feel for everyone, and to give the lower passions control over the higher powers of the being. Is it not time that all should aim to dispense with flesh foods? How can those who are seeking to become pure, refined, and holy, that they may have the companionship of heavenly angels, continue to use as food anything that has so harmful an effect on soul and body? How can they take the life of God's creatures that they may consume the flesh? Let them rather return to the wholesome and delicious food given to man in the beginning. Among those who are waiting for the coming of the Lord, meat eating will eventually be done away. Flesh will cease to form a part of their diet. We should ever keep this end in view and endeavor to work steadily toward it. I cannot think that in the practice of flesh eating we are in harmony with the light which God has been pleased to give us. Again and again, I have been shown that God is bringing His people back to His original design. That is, not to subsist on the flesh of dead animals. He would have us teach people a better way. If meat is discarded, if a liking for fruits and grains is encouraged, it will soon be as God in the beginning designed it should be. No meat will be used by His people." She goes on, "It is a mistake to suppose that muscular strength depends on the use of animal food. The needs of the system can be better supplied, and more vigorous health can be enjoyed without its use. The grains, with fruits, nuts, and vegetables, contain all the nutritive properties necessary to make good blood. Had the use of flesh been essential to health and strength, animal food would have been included in the diet appointed man in the beginning. If we could be benefited by indulging the desire for flesh foods, I would not make this appeal to you. But I know we cannot. Flesh foods are injurious to the physical well-being, and we should learn to do without them. Those who are in a position where it is possible to secure a vegetarian diet, but who choose to follow their own preferences in this matter, eating and drinking as they please, will gradually grow careless of the instruction the Lord has given regarding other phases of the present truth, and will lose their perception of what is truth. They will surely reap as they have sown." End quote. I would urge Adventists to read through counsels on diet and foods with an open mind and a balanced mind for themselves. My comments here are not to raise controversy or condemnation. I only have a burden to make sure that we are 100% consistent and fair and accurate, and to make the same distinction between animal foods that was made in the councils. Otherwise, we'll be in cognitive dissonance and spiritual dissonance within our own minds and with the Holy Spirit. Regarding other animal products, our counsel is that everyone should avail themselves of what is most nutritious from what is available. Mrs. White wrote, "We are to be brought into connection with the masses. Should health reform be taught to them in its most extreme form, harm would be done. We ask them to leave off meat and drinking tea and coffee. This is well, but some say that milk should also be given up. This is a subject that needs to be handled carefully. There are poor families whose diet consists of bread and milk, and if they can get it, a little fruit. All flesh should be discarded, but vegetables should be made palatable with a little milk or cream or something equivalent. The poor say, when health reform is presented to them, 'What shall we eat? We cannot afford to buy the nut foods.' As I preach the gospel to the poor, I am instructed to tell them to eat what food is most nourishing. I cannot say to them, 'You must not eat eggs or milk or cream. You must use no butter in the preparation of food.' The gospel must be preached to the poor, and the time has not yet come to prescribe the strictest diet. The time will come when we may have to discard some of the articles of diet we now use, such as milk and cream and eggs. But my message is that you must not bring yourself to a time of trouble beforehand and thus afflict yourself with death. Wait till the Lord prepares the way before you." Counsels on Diet, page 206. I think these statements are very clear for any unbiased reader. It's very moderating to extremism, and it's very definitive in the face of just unfettered liberalism. There is an ideal to which we should be continually advancing closer, and at the same time, let each person use what is most nutritious from what's available to them. So while we do live in an age where the soil is depleted, we also live in an age of abundance. We now have access to very nutritionally dense, diverse foods from around the world that our ancestors never had the access to. Things like chia seeds and hemp seeds and algae and, things that were only regionally accessible before, we now have in abundance at our fingertips. On the other hand, animals are only more diseased than they've ever been before, and relying on refrigeration or antibiotics to mitigate this creates a slew of other health issues like the imbalancing of our gut microbiome, the accumulation of toxins through biomagnification. Ethically and locally sourced animal products are absolutely superior, but the ideal from creation hasn't changed. Point number 7, has the time come for a total return to the Eden diet? I think that there's a reason why the book of Daniel is where we get a lion's share, pun intended, of our insights in end-time prophecy. We in the end times should pay attention to Daniel. Why does the book of Daniel essentially begin with an entire chapter devoted to a test of diet and the spiritual, physical, and mental benefits that attended a return to the Genesis diet? Did God perhaps intend for us in the end times to take note of this because we would need it before we face our own fiery furnace of trials that are to come on us to try us? I think it's an inescapable reality that the signs of the end times are fulfilling around us every day. Ellen said that the time would come for a full return to the Eden diet, and I wonder, is there a more likely time than now? Did the diet make them holier? No. But it did tune their minds and bodies to the frequency of heaven, because the heightening of the mental, physical, and moral power is a natural consequence of falling in line with our innate design. I've been thinking about this recently, the relatively minor but monumental tests that have come to God's people throughout history. Just bend over when you hear the music play. Just don't let anybody see your daily prayers. Just put a pinch of incense on Caesar's altar. Just say that you renounce these heretical teachings, and you can eat and you can live in peace. Yet people chose to give their lives rather than to compromise these external evidences of their loyalty to God. Not just, well, God knows my heart. Well, I'm not really worshiping. I realized that we all like to sit in our comfortable houses and think to ourselves, well, I would be faithful to God too. Of course, I would be faithful, right? But no, if at this very moment I was faced with the life of my child or the well-being of my child or my own life versus some minor compromise like that, I would make the compromise. And honestly, wouldn't you? I'm not there, realistically. Do we know God? Do we love God? And do we trust God enough to be a Daniel, to be a Hananiah, a Mishael, or an Azariah? I've been praying for a connection with God that is strong enough, for a love that is deep enough, and that is complete enough to endure weariness, delay, and hunger. But honestly, I'm not there yet. So if God has gone to the care of revealing any way that I can sharpen our connection and that I can come more fully into harmony with the restoration of creation, I, for one, am going to pay attention to it. I'm not going to go to some crazy extreme, but I'm definitely going to pay attention to investigate how I can do this in the most balanced and healthy way possible. I'm not going to minimize it. I'm not going to rationalize it, and I'm not going to dismiss it. This is about more than just being known for what we eat. Daniel and his buddies were eating seeds and grains and nuts and fruits and vegetables. And we can learn how to do that in a way that doesn't just make us feel good temporarily, but helps us to be truly healthy and to feel good. Mrs. White says, "There are many who feel that they cannot get along without flesh food, but if these would place themselves on the Lord's side, resolutely resolved to walk in the way of his guidance, they would receive strength and wisdom, as did Daniel and his fellows. They would find that the Lord would give them sound judgment." In Daniel chapter 1, at the end of 10 days, their appearance looked better and their bodies healthier than all the youths who ate the king's food. And God gave them knowledge and proficiency in every kind of wisdom. In every matter of wisdom and understanding about which the king questioned them, he found them 10 times better. Do you need wisdom and understanding? I know I do. And I'm not being creative here. The Bible makes the connection between the diet and the gifting. This is not about legalism or self-righteousness or brownie points, but it is about salvation, because salvation is restoration. Salvation is about restoration to God's original ideal, and that ideal is a holistic way of living and being. We were created and placed here as stewards to protect, preserve, and watch over the life of Earth in a harmonious ecosystem where all life gives to all other life in a circle of beneficence that is the foundation of life and existence throughout all of the universe. We were placed here in a microcosm of the government of heaven as representatives of God in his own government, in a dominion of service, in a dominion that does not take, but rather gives self-sacrificially. We were placed here in a world without death, without predation. We were given a diet that consisted of all that the earth gives to us freely. It is the diet that we were designed to run optimally on, and it is the diet to which we are returning in God's plan of restoration. We are to create here and to prepare for a hereafter in which there is no death. And it is not that any diet makes us holier or saves us, but God's original diet and design does tune our nerves to the frequency of heaven. It keeps our bodies clean and highly electrically charged, and it keeps our higher powers in proper management over our animal nature so that we can step into the perfection of love in union with the Holy Spirit. That perfection of love and self-sacrifice is the principle of life. And it is the restoration to which salvation opens the door. Sin is really not a legal matter, it's a relational one. And salvation is about more than just forgiving our sins, declaring us righteous, and getting us into heaven. We can't just stop at justification. Sanctification is the process of restoration. Salvation is about restoring relationship, and through relationship, restoring the whole creation. The whole creation is groaning until this is accomplished in us. It's not as though this is science versus revelation either. There is a significant body of well-conducted science that's in favor of a plant-based diet. There are prestigious and well-educated professionals who stand in support of a plant-based diet. I would recommend looking into epidemiological studies such as the China study. It was termed the Grand Prix of epidemiology by the New York Times. This was the most comprehensive nutritional study that's ever been conducted. No other nutritional study has ever come close in terms of scope. These incredibly large-scale, randomized and longitudinal studies were led by Professor T. Colin Campbell, professor of nutritional biochemistry at Cornell University. The China-Cornell-Oxford project, which this was a 20-year study. It examined the mortality rates from cancer and other chronic diseases from 1973 to 1975 in 65 counties in China. The China study analyzes the link between the use of animal products, including dairy, and chronic illnesses such as coronary heart disease, diabetes, breast cancer, prostate cancer, and bowel cancer. The results are so detailed that diets high in specific animal foods based on their regional availability can be seen to correspond with higher rates of specific cancers. Yes, there are so many people these days, doctors, nurses, dietitians, all saying different things, contradicting each other, raising fair points and valid issues and concerns. But in the beginning, God said, "I have given you every green plant yielding seed that is on the surface of the whole land, and every tree which has the fruit of a tree yielding seed. They are to be for food for you, and you will eat the plants of the field." And God saw everything that he had made, and behold, it was very good.